Hi everyone and happy Heart Unions Week. Welcome to our webinar. Today we're going to be talking about 0 hours contracts. Before we get going and we introduce our speakers, I just want to remind you of 2 ways you can participate in the webinar. You can chat in the panel that's on the right of your screen, where you can chat to other people on the webinar or chat to us. You can also ask a question for our speakers by clicking on the Ask a Question link under the screen, and we'll get to those questions afterwards. You can also sign our petition to ban 0 hours contracts, and you should be able to see a green button underneath the main screen. If you click on that, it will take you through to our petition. So we're joined today by 3 colleagues from the STUC's Better Than Zero campaign, and here they are.
Hi everyone, my name's Brian Simpson. As well as being an organiser with the Better Than Zero campaign, I'm also a trade union organiser with Unite the Union.
I'm Claire Peden. I'm an organiser on the Better Than Zero campaign. I also work in the Young Workers Project, and I'm a member of the Bakers Food and Allied Workers Union. Some of you may know it as the Bakers Union.
I'm Jennifer Toome. I am the branch secretary of Unite's hospitality branch, and I'm also an activist for Better Than Zero.
Okay, so thanks. Can you tell us, for those who may not know, can you tell us about the Better Than Zero campaign?
So the Better Than Zero campaign really came out 2015 from a group of bar workers, people who work in cafes and restaurants and hotels, really people that had had enough of 0 hours contracts, people who'd had enough of not even receiving the minimum wage, never mind the living wage. And really, if I can be perfectly frank, people who did not know a lot about unions. They wanted to take action themselves within their own workplaces. The first target was the G1 group. So a lot of the original activists came from the G1 group, which is the largest hospitality employer in Scotland. A company tens of thousands of pounds for not paying the minimum wage to their staff. So we clubbed together, I think, maybe 30 or 40 people to begin with, and really started taking direct action in those premises against those employers who were breaking the law, never mind, had 0 hours contracts. So that's where we came from. We're now 4 years old, which is quite crazy. And in that time, we've grown massively. I would say we're probably the go-to, even before people think about trade unions. If you're in the bar industry, they think about the Better Than Zero campaign, which is an incredible testament to the massive work that our activists and volunteers put in every single day. If you go into a bar in Glasgow or Edinburgh or Aberdeen and you ask them about trade unions, they may or may not know what you're talking about. If you talk to them about Better Than Zero, I guarantee they will know what you're talking about. We get 250,000 hits a week through social media, which is bigger than any other union. So really it's an alternative organising model, which is not supposed to replace trade unions. As you've heard, there's a lot of unions involved. It's really about giving workers an alternative voice, which becomes an organising voice through the trade union movement.
Yeah. So that's great to hear, and I'm sure there's going to be lots of really useful information that we can learn from today's webinar. So can you tell us a bit about who are most likely to be affected by exploitation through 0 hours contracts, please? Yeah.
So we know through surveys and through engagement with workers, particularly young workers, students. I think that's because about 60% of students we know have to work now, usually in part-time employment, 0 contracts, and 40% of them are in hospitality. And these hospitality sector, fast food and retail, and now probably keeping in this the care sector, there is predominantly young female student workers, and that makes them more vulnerable to the exploitation through 0 contracts. Sorry?
Most vulnerable.
Yeah, most vulnerable. And I think when they go into these workplaces, they feel like they don't have a voice. They don't know they've actually got statutory rights as well. And I suppose sometimes they're subject to massive power differentials in the workplace, and that then leads to them being exploited.
I've personally represented workers who have almost been triple affected, whether that be because of sexism, racism, xenophobia in the workplace. So I would say, without being tokenistic about it, the worst affected by exploitation of 0 hours contracts are migrant women, because they are almost doubly affected by an employer who has taken advantage of the fact that they weren't born here, has taken advantage of the fact that they are already probably going to be paid less because they're a woman. So what we've found is that, for example, Eastern European workers are disproportionately affected by 0 hours contracts, because they just simply will not know that what they are on, either the 0 hours contract itself or the fact that they're paid less than the minimum wage. So they're probably the worst affected demographic.
And financially, it's about a £3 difference in their hourly rate. That's roughly what it equates to, isn't it?
Yep.
Okay. So, to play devil's advocate, don't 0 hours contracts offer flexibility for those with other commitments?
They are sold,
That's what they're packaged up and sold as.
Happy to be truthful.
yeah.
So if it works as they potentially say it would on paper, it would be great. It's the same as if it would, the rise in our wage to lots of pounds an hour would be fantastic, but we're not getting to the bottom of that problem, which is that it's totally one-sided flexibility in most cases. Without a doubt, in the most cases. For example, you can't plan to be off work for 2 weeks with something like tonsillitis or a broken leg. And they don't have anything. They don't have any record. They don't have to honour that at all. So you're then battling for your statutory sick pay. Whilst you're already unwell, now who's saying? I know we'll go on to it, but who's saying as well this person is not very vulnerable in the means of like mental health, and also, if you did want to book a holiday, you did want to take 2 days off, and maybe 2 days down the line, you might not get any shifts in your next rota. It's a power play. Workers. 0 hour contracts are very, very easy to exploit by your employer, and they're not very useful at the moment.
It makes it difficult for people to plan their lives, as Jen said, to plan their holidays. And we do know that people are not obliged to provide hours for those in 0 hour contracts. And I do think that some people buy into it knowing that that's the case. Some people are sold this vision of, you'll get 30, 40 hours every single week. But I think what those in 0 hour contracts don't actually know is that they're not obliged to do the shifts. And one of the things, we speak to a lot of people, don't we? And they come back and say, oh no, I have to do that. They're leaving school. Some workers are leaving school in the middle of the day to go and pick up a shift. They're leaving college, they're leaving uni to pick up these shifts. And they don't actually realise that it's their right to refuse the shift. And then I suppose you get the backlash of the ones that do know it's their right. They say no to a shift, and that affects them further down the line where they don't get a shift for the next week or so because they've said no. So they're trapped in this sort of situation, aren't they?
So Shane has just come on and pointed out exactly what Claire's just said, that some people most people actually that I represent who are on a 0 hours contract, if they want to take a mental health week out, which is their entitlement because they shouldn't be bound by hours, they will say to the bar manager or the owner of the company, look, I want to take next week off, and that's fine. And then the following week, they won't get any hours. They're seen to be unreliable. And I think that's what's particularly unacceptable about it. I would love to live in a world where there was a two-way communication and it was about flexibility and the employer was as reasonable as the worker was being, but that isn't where we live. We live in a situation, as you said, where there's a complete power dynamic where the employer holds all the cards. I've just represented a woman yesterday in Edinburgh who is on a 0 hours contract as a housekeeper in a hotel. She raised a grievance for physical harassment. She's been physically assaulted by her manager. She raised the grievance in December and has not had a single hour since putting in that grievance. She's effectively been sacked, but without a dismissal process, without a disciplinary process, because she's on a 0 hours contract and the employer can just pull that plug.
And one of the things for the 0 hour contracts, even through recruitment now, is you are workplaces are recruiting for a position that would maybe usually be one full-time worker, and now they can employ 5, 6 workers to fill these hours. So they have control of who they give the shifts, when they send them home. And again, it's as if you're easily disposable, basically, aren't you?
Yeah.
It's also not just about like I know with other commitments, there's holidays and things like that. People are carers for people in their life as well. Like that would be you, for example, pushed into employer. I can do 4 or 5 hours a week, 8 or 9 hours a week. Then you've got the stress of I might not get my 8 or 9 hours this week if I don't do the 12 that they've offered me. And then you've got the stress of caring, you've got the stress of trying to work, but it doesn't really matter because on a bit of paper you're technically in employment, so it's fine.
Yeah.
It's horrible.
The only worker who has convinced me, because we have a few students who'll say, look, I don't want them banned because I quite like the flexibility. Within 10 minutes, these guys will have convinced them that they should be on a minimum hour contract. Because what people don't realise is we are not saying ban 0 hours and everyone should work 30, 40 hours. We are saying you should choose how many hours you work based on the average that you worked the previous 3 months. The only worker who's ever convinced me that actually a 0 hours worker works for them was an architect who's on £180 an hour, is what he can claim. He's able to work 2 or 3 hours a week, and that's fine. He's paid his bills. The vast majority of the workers we're talking about on 0 hours contracts earn the minimum wage.
Yeah.
So they cannot rely on 5 or 6 hours a week. And they certainly can't rely on no hours throughout the month of January just because the bar that they work for is not busy.
Yeah, exactly. And it is about control. You have to toe the line as well. You can't. You're not encouraged to challenge issues. You're not encouraged to challenge bad behaviour. And if you do, as you said, you don't get a shift. And that is probably one of the key problems with the 0 hour contracts.
So yeah, that's obviously really interesting about how 0 hours contracts are all one-sided. The flexibility is only on the employer. But I'm sure there are other negative impacts that this has on the workers themselves. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah.
Where do we start? I mean, from mental health. Imagine the anxiety of not knowing 1 week to the next how many hours you're going to get.
How you got to pay your bills.
If you've managed to get a mortgage on that, how the hell can you possibly not? How can you sleep when you don't know, 1 week to the next that you're going to have enough hours to pay that mortgage? The obvious mental health effects on people who aren't even diagnosed with mental health issues. Imagine having general anxiety disorder or bipolar or depression and how that drives you into a complete hole of just not knowing what you can do. You don't know, you can't book holidays in advance.
It's
the effect it's had on you is...
It's very well, for example, I was on a 0 hour contract doing full-time hours for 11 years. Recently I'm now in full-time employment. That was with a local government in Scotland as well. It's a vast difference. The mental health aspect of it as well. So, for example, if you're going from a 0 hours contract, say you did suffer from something, so you have your caring commitments, you have health issues, anything you have to deal with. It's a totally different world from when you're used to scheduling your shift and squeezing in a 6 o'clock appointment for 10 minutes, and then going to a full-time job and saying, "Oh, I want to go away for an appointment," or "I'll take a day off," and it's why you take a day off. You've got a doctor's appointment. It's I think mental health is a really, really, really big thing because as well in the workplace it is. If you're on a 0 hour contract, it's hard enough as it is at the moment because you don't have any support. Well, that's why we're here. Security. To get to that point where you can and you feel like you're strong enough to stick up for yourself, and then when you do, there's a massive chance that you won't get another 0 hour shift for the foreseeable future. So why would you want to challenge it? You're just going to dig yourself into a deeper hole.
Yeah.
Employers are able to use 0 hours as a wedge to drive between workers. People who work in the hospitality industry know that it's not the wages or the 0 hours contracts that attracts them, it's the social aspect, it's the friendly nature, your workmates or your family. What employers and some managers like to do with 0 hours is to wedge in and pitch Jen against Claire and say, you're my favourite,
Yeah.
you're my dog's body, so I'm going to give you 35 hours this week.
Yeah.
Jen's let me down for a shift on Sunday, so she's not going to get any hours. So it's a way to atomise the workforce.
Yeah.
And I suppose, without being arrogant, we are the antidote to that,
Mm-hmm.
because we are trying to collectivise
Yeah.
around
I
zero
don't
hours.
think it's arrogant. I think a lot of managers like to play God
Yeah.
with people's lives.
Divide and conquer,
divide
isn't
and
it?
conquer. And especially with that situation
Mhm.
where you can pick and choose one or two people that you can function with for a few weeks and justify it as you want. You don't have any recourse. You can literally just say to someone, no, you're not working next week.
Mhm. They don't have the same duty of care, I don't think, anymore
That's a big
to
thing.
those, particularly for workers in zero-hour contracts. So when it becomes, it comes to mental health issues or general sickness, they just cast workers aside because they're easily replaceable, and they don't need to answer to anyone for doing that. There's no one there to question them. There's no one there to challenge them. So it's became the norm, I would say, and even in workplaces
Absolutely.
where zero contracts probably weren't the norm.
Yeah,
It's
they've been
became, yeah.
used. People think zero hours are a modern. They've only just come out in the last 5 or 6 years. Even under Thatcher, you had as and when required contracts, which were effectively 0 hours contracts. What we've seen is a burgeoning use of them in the hospitality and retail sector, because you can increase your profit margins massively as an organisation if you don't rely on certain overheads. The G1 group, who we work against a lot, we've got a lot of members in there. They have a margin of overheads for their staff of 12%, which means that they are not allowed to spend more than 12% on staff. For any organisation, that is completely impossible. So what they're doing is putting everyone on 0 hours. Even the managers are on 0 hours, even though they'll do 50, 60 hours a week. And it's to drive down costs and to drive up profit. That's why 0 hours have become the kind of go-to for the service industry.
So you've mentioned a little bit about things that people are reluctant to do to challenge this, but do you have any suggestions of how people in these situations can begin to challenge these poor working conditions?
Yeah, I mean, Better Than Zero came about as really a rallying cry for hospitality and retail workers who wanted to do something about their terrible working conditions. What we've ended up becoming, with the sheer size of us on social media, is really a point of contact for anger. People, I mean, without exaggeration, 30 to 40 messages a day we will get. Some, asking basic questions about what their rights are, and we can answer that right away. Then there'll be someone saying, for the last year and a half, I have not received a single paid holiday at a hotel chain. A massive hotel chain.
So common.
And you're like, what?
Yep.
So to answer your question, what we do immediately is we will go out and visit that workplace, obviously undercover to a certain extent, find out what the issues are. Is it widely held? Is it deeply felt? Are there a lot of people affected by it? Get some contacts. We'll speak to several people. What we would always encourage workers to do in the first instance is to speak to their colleagues and see what the anger is. Are they the only person affected by it? If they are, they've still got potential for a grievance, where you would raise an individual grievance against the employer, and obviously join a union to get individual representation. But we would always say collectivise everything. If you're a woman who's been treated differently because you're a woman, the chances are 50 or 60% of your workplace will also be affected by that. If you're a migrant worker, there will be 10, 20% or even higher affected by that. So our position would always be collectivise whatever that issue is, whether that be through a collective grievance. So we would support you guys. We've got reps across the country who are legally trained to be able to represent you, and also put a collective grievance together, where not only are you putting your demands and challenges to the company, but you're doing it in a collective fashion. You're protecting yourself from individual victimisation.
Yeah. I mean, I think not everyone that contacts us is ready to sort of take action, as we say, and maybe not confident enough to speak to their colleagues as well. So there are other things we do, whether we invite them along. We have hubs where people can come along. You don't need to be in a union, or you can be from any union, it doesn't matter. You can be from any sector, you can do any amount of hours, it doesn't matter. And you come along and we just have a discussion based around what your rights are and what you can do. And it's just to sort of build confidence and build a sense maybe of family. Because what we've recognised is if you're not in a traditional unionised workplace, you don't have that same sense of union family. So that's where the hubs that we organise come in. We've started launching them in colleges and universities as well. And it's just to get someone involved and get to the stage where either they'll share their story anonymously or publicly, or they'll share their story in a room with a couple of people, and just getting them to feel, I suppose, confident enough to speak about the issues. They might not be ready to take direct action or to collectivise in the workplace, but they can also get involved and support other people as well, challenge their employers.
We do a lot of naming and shaming. We would rather do, in fact, we ensure that we have the buy-in of the workers before we do something like that. But say, for example, we've heard several verified reports of one big employer who just isn't playing ball, they're breaking the law. We will get the media involved, we'll get politicians involved. We have a three or four pronged approach to put the pressure on. But the number one way that you will win better change in the workplace is if the collective majority of workers are behind some kind of demand or grievance. So we've had a similar campaign in cinema in Glasgow, where workers used to they had quite good conditions, they used to get their taxis paid for them. They had that removed without any consultation, and what was happening is women were walking 2 or 3 miles to get home and were being verbally assaulted
and physically
sexually assaulted.
Pretty awful.
We obviously gave them the advice and the support to be able to put a grievance together, and we had 70-80 people on the first grievance
signed a petition,
who actually signed
and they have actually formed their own union branch internally, and they're trained as reps, and they're still challenging this issue. But it's really about they started going around and speaking to their colleagues and getting their colleagues on side and realising there was wider issues there that they could support each other within the workplace to challenge these.
Absolutely.
So you've mentioned that there might not always be a traditional union structure in that workplace.
Yes.
But if there is, what do you think the role of union reps could be? What's their role in this? What can they do?
If there's the majority of the workplaces, to be honest, that we're organising in, so if we call it the service industry, front-facing, customer-facing roles, including call centres and places like that, will not have a union presence. I would say 80 to 90% will not have any collective bargaining agreement. They might have a few members on the inside. Our advice would be that you join the union is obviously relevant, and the TUC can help guide you towards that. So that's the first instance, is you as an individual joining the union, encouraging your colleagues to join that union. For example, Unite have got an explicit campaign within the hospitality industry, which I believe is the only one that is just for hospitality workers. And we've got thousands of members now across the UK. I would say to join the unions as quickly as possible, get your colleagues to join, look for the structures within the organisation that allow you to go on the training, to be trained up as a rep. Don't want to speak in Jen's behalf, but that's how she got involved. She is the branch secretary of Unite Hospitality through Better Than Zero.
Yeah, very angry one night after a shift. And the rest of the story kind of tells itself. I was replied within a few hours, in fact minutes. And I think you only maybe had 2 or 3 people online at the time. Callan, and then we got straight to a training course, and within 2 training courses I was signed up.
Yep. And now you're part of the branch structure.
And now I'm part of a branch structure. So that was just it was a year ago today.
So
happy Union Day.
What Better Than Zero looks to do is
really
take part in, but radically challenge those structures that already exist. Because let's be honest, some of them need changed.
Yeah.
Some of them have not had someone under the age of 50 join them in the last 10 years, right? That needs to change. Yeah. What Better Than Zero has done for the last 3 or 4 years is bring young women into the organisations, the respective unions, and it's been a shot in the arm for the affiliated unions.
Yep,
definitely. And even the fact that you can simply go on Facebook after your shift and just be like, oh, this is what happened. I've had the final straw. It's live. Do you know what I mean? You're finding out what these things are happening straight away from the start to the end of the incident or case. So it's a good.
I just wanted to, Bella Soltez has come in and said, I work on a 0 hours contract for 3 companies. When they book me for work, most often they cut my booked hours at the end of the shift and they don't pay the initial hours what they book me in. Is that legal? Now, that's a really good question because unfortunately it is, because a 0 hours contract, there's absolutely no contractual guarantee or obligation to provide hours. We know that. But we've just challenged we had a member up in Inverness who worked for a bar who was on his way into a shift. I think it was starting in like 45 minutes. And he got a text. He'd already paid the 12 quid to get on the train to get to work. He was on the train and they said, sorry, mate, shift's cancelled. I think it was 4 or 5 hour shift. We took that to tribunal and we won a settlement whereby he was effectively, the employer had to pay for the full shift. What we have since argued or used that as almost as a precedent to say, well, anything other than 2 hours, if your shift has been cancelled or your hours have been taken off you, we're using that as an argument to actually enforce what isn't a legal precedent. It's not a statute, but we are using that almost as a threat to employers to say, look, if you're cancelling with 2 and 3 hours notice, really any less than 24 hours notice, not only would you be liable for those hours that have been cut, but actually the employer should be paying for the full shift.
Yeah. And that includes not only travelling into work and told you don't need it, it's if you're in the middle of your shift and you get told to go home because you're no longer needed because it's not busy. I think it's quite important. That happens very, very often, doesn't it? And it's not an option. They don't say who would like to go home because I'm pretty sure people would. They say you go home, you go home, you go home. And then it's the same the next day on the phone and they expect you in within half an hour to start a shift as well at the last minute. So.
And I'm sure within some workplaces it might be the same people or it might be the people that stick up for themselves, so question management that gets sent home first. So it's all just makes it a bit more precarious.
Okay, so what do you think are some of the key ways to winning positive change? What sort of things can unions do? Can union reps do? Can non-union reps do? What can we do to try and make things better?
I hope I'm speaking for everyone here that we believe that the key to change is education. So it's through sort of learning opportunities, through learning what your rights are, through learning how to challenge it. We can provide workers with skills and confidence basically, and in a sense empower them to speak to their employers, speak to their workmates and take action and demand change. And we do, I mean, there's been a lot of sort of examples of training courses, such as we do things about take control, identifying leaders, we do things on your rights and your employment rights. And it's just any bits of skills or knowledge that can help them feel confident, I suppose, to challenge bad working practice.
Collective education, as Claire said, is for me the number one way to involve people in what we're trying to do, because if you are the average worker in a bar, you have never even heard of a union, never mind had an impulse to join one, you will go along to an event that is about knowing your rights. Every single branch meeting we've had in Unite Hospitality, and a lot of the Better Than Zero meetings, are pitched on the premise of, know your rights and how to enforce them. That is what brings 50, 60 people to an event. It's when you let them know, what their legal rights are, what are their legal minimum safety net rights, and then how do we smash that glass ceiling? How do we go beyond that and win better? It is legal to not give someone hours on a 0 hours contract, but it shouldn't be. It's not morally acceptable. So what we start with is the legal right. You shouldn't be working more than 48 hours unless you've signed out. You shouldn't be on less than the minimum wage. You shouldn't be treated differently because you're black or you're a woman or you're LGBT. So that's where we start as a premise of safety net, and then we push upwards. What ends up happening is that over the course of that training session, or over the course of the next few weeks, and Jen can certainly testify to this, is that's how you become active, that's how you get involved, because you get angry at the fact that these are my rights and I'm not even getting the legal minimum. And it drives you towards actually fighting for better.
It's a very, to get everyone in a room in that situation as well, so it's still quite raw as well, these events that still happen to people, for example. So you've messaged a page, get an email back, you can go to a training session or a meeting. For me, it was take back control. And I met people that day that I still talk to just now. But the best thing about that is that through the course of that 2 days, it's just a 2-day course, you can see people getting more confident. You can see them say, I can't wait to go back into work and do this, can't wait to go back into work and do it. And even just that in itself, giving them confidence enough, and maybe they don't need to go in and make a big collective grievance for this certain issue. They know that they can just they can go in and have the confidence to address these things. And then now they have the backing. It's like a family thing as well. You're bringing them in, and it's a good environment to be in.
One of the best training sessions we've ever done was the one that Jen came to, and it was called Take Back Control. Very explicit. How do you take control of the workplace? That's not some revolutionary, sack the manager, we can control this place, right? You're not setting up a cooperative yet. All you're looking to do is to say it is unfair that 80% of the workforce who earn the least amount of money are actually bringing the most amount of profit into the organisation. So, for example, we've just launched a collective grievance in a chain restaurant in Glasgow, Edinburgh and Aberdeen. They're having 40% of their tips taken off them and used to pay for the salaries of the managers. Now, that's not the manager's fault. That they are sold on the premise that they will be paid 40,000 when they're actually getting 22,000 by the company, and the rest is being used as tax avoidance. It's unbelievable. So what we did is we got 80% of the staff on the floor to sign that grievance. We've even got managers to sign it as well. And that is what has pushed the company to bring in a brand new tipping policy. All of that is perfectly legal. I would argue it's a form of tax evasion, but unfortunately it's perfectly legal. It's only through a collective grievance, only through the workers coming together, that they've actually put pressure on the employer. That Take Back Control event was really about teaching workers how to take issues collectively. How do you pinpoint your issue, collectivise it around, what is the most infuriating part of the issue, and then presenting your demands, how to do that. Do you do that through direct action? Do you do that through a formal grievance meeting? So training is foundationally important for what we're doing.
Something we'll agree on.
Yep.
So, from your experiences in Scotland, what do you think the governments can do to help change the situation or improve things?
That we'll need another 2 hours.
We've lobbied the government in quite a few issues, haven't we,
we've
already?
Lobbied them in a lot. I mean, we're in London, so talking about Westminster, I should say that for those who don't know, Scotland employment law is not devolved in Scotland. So actually, there's a lot the Scottish government could do and isn't doing, absolutely, but there's a lot that it can't physically do in Westminster is the focus of a lot of our ire and frustration. So, for example, right now we're trying to ban unpaid trial shifts. Unpaid trial shifts are just so unacceptable. It's like you're being used as free labour to cover someone who's phoned in sick. We're lobbying Westminster to get them banned. Same with 0 hours contracts. We've campaigned to get them banned for years. We're also putting pressure on the Scottish Government and local authorities to change licensing laws. One of the best ways that you can stop an employer mistreating their staff, apart from by getting the workers organised, is to say, well, we're going to take our licence off you. We're going to stop you from making trade. Unfortunately, the Licence in Scotland Act, as it is in Scotland, is so opaque. It doesn't have any mention of respecting workers' rights. So what we're doing at the moment is lobbying the Scottish Government and local authorities to change that, so that if you're an employer with a past history of mistreatment of staff, if you haven't paid the minimum wage, if you've been taken to tribunal, if you've discriminated against workers, then you cannot hold a licence. That is, apart from organising workers, the biggest stick that you can hit an employer with, because you're preventing them from making profit.
Yeah.
But yeah, on the most local level, from councillors all the way to the Prime Minister, again, not being arrogant, there is no doubt in my head that if it wasn't for the Better Than Zero campaign, if it wasn't for certain TUC affiliates fighting for fair tips, we would not have convinced a very anti-worker Tory government from saying, and of course it's not done it yet, but saying that it's going to bring in legislation to ensure that workers get 100% of tips. We've put that on. We've put 0 hours contracts on the radar, where it's the workers in the hospitality industry who've pushed for fair tips.
Yeah.
So sometimes lobbying, you forget the effect that you've actually had on politicians until you see legislation, but actually we've helped to change the narrative on so many issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is necessary. We do need to lobby the Scottish Government or Westminster. It doesn't matter who, but I think we have to be clear that it's not all, the problem is not always with legislation. We have legislation already in place. We have the national minimum wage. We have how many hours a week? Yeah, how many hours a week can you work? We have that you're entitled to paid holidays. We've got all that. Quite a lot of the people, I would say, that we speak to, that we engage with, aren't getting that. They aren't. I mean, it's
their employers breaking the law.
Yeah, they're breaking the law, but who enforces that and who makes sure that everyone's being paid fairly and that they're getting their holidays? And that is where we usually come in. That's what people message us, as you said earlier, and say, I've not had a paid holiday. Or, I mean, we had a restaurant in Glasgow that wasn't even paying the minimum wage. And again, it was the women that weren't being paid minimum wage. The men were paid slightly more. They were just, they were probably just getting the minimum wage. It wasn't like loads of money, but the women were actually being paid below the minimum wage. They didn't even know what they were entitled to. And then they had actually contacted Better Than Zero. We put them in touch as well with the Bakers Union, and they went back to the workplace. It was a small group of them. There wasn't a lot. It was 3 of them went back and actually challenged that issue themselves just by coming to, I think they came to the course after you, because they felt that bit more confidence. They went back and spoke to the manager about it. As soon as he realised that they knew their rights, he started paying them the minimum wage. And it doesn't seem like a lot, but to them it's a win. And it is a win because they went back and done that themselves, or we've done that as a group.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So it probably takes us on, like you were saying about the licensing board. I suppose that's quite an important thing when we're saying like lobbying sort of government and local councils. And we have been quite active for quite a few of the campaigns. Maybe one of the recent ones is a Safe Home campaign, and that was in the back of what we discussed, what we spoke about earlier with the Cineworld workers. So we realised there was I suppose a massive issue with late night workers, and I suppose the increase in sexual assaults in the city, and basically the total disregard of safety from the employers. So it's a case of you finish your shift, you step over that door, they no longer care. And it's different for if you're a customer, there's an extended duty of care for customers to make sure they're safe. But when you're an employee, you finish your shift and it's like, see you later. Yep. There's no buses on, there's no trains on. It doesn't matter. Your minimum wage, can't afford a taxi. The employer doesn't really need to think about that. So we launched the Safe Home campaign on the back of genuine case studies of particularly young women who had been assaulted on the way home. And this, we campaigned the Glasgow City Council to put recommendations into their licence recommendations, and we were successful in getting, I wouldn't say it's the best, but it's a small change. So anyone that applies for a 4 a.m. licence now in the city will have to show what they're doing to ensure that their workers get home safely.
Another example in Edinburgh, the Fringe, the largest festival in the world, I think, international festival. Tens of thousands of workers. We carried out the largest survey ever carried out for Fringe workers. Some of the stats were really shocking. A third didn't receive any wages whatsoever. They were doing it entirely voluntary. This is for private sector companies. 49% worked more than 50 hours. So what you had was a situation where only 2/3 of workers were being paid for working more than 50 hours a week. And the percentage of those who were actually getting paid the minimum wage was tiny. So you were seeing massive breaches of the Minimum Wage Act, massive breaches of the Working Time Directive, serious discrimination, equality issues, women being paid less than men, non-Scottish workers being paid less than migrant workers. So we launched the Fair Fringe campaign, which came out of workers from Unite, workers in different campaigns across Edinburgh. We have really successfully put pressure on Edinburgh City Council. We've put pressure on the Scottish Government, and we are winning. We are forcing employers to bring in the living wage, to get rid of 0 hours contracts. We've just won a seriously life-changing increase in wages for workers in the bar industry in Edinburgh, where every single venue that is leased by Edinburgh City Council, so that includes the Usher Hall, assembly rooms, have went from the minimum wage to the living wage. Not the London £10.20 living wage, but £9 an hour. That's amazing. That's a serious increase of about nearly 20%. All of them will now be given a minimum hour contract, which means they choose 1 week to the next how many hours they work. That is life-changing for bar workers across Edinburgh, and that's been an example of the pressure that we've brought to bear on Edinburgh City Council, who, certain councillors have paid lip service to supporting what we do, but the proof is in the pudding, and we've convinced even Tories on that council that actually workers' rights are fundamentally important.
I suppose it's key that change is possible in a sense, and when we say we, it's not Brian and myself and Jen. It's led and driven by the workers, and hundreds of workers, and we're there wherever we can to support, I suppose, and provide resources. But all these campaigns are led by the workers themselves. And when you get, I suppose, a recommendation, a change to legislation or a win, it really does mean a lot to everyone involved.
Yeah.
We point them in the right direction. Really. And let them go on their path. It's quite nice to watch sometimes.
So one final question from me before we can take a look at some of the other questions that have been sent in by viewers. So what advice would you give someone that's being treated unfairly by their employer? I mean, you've covered some things so far, but if you could just sort of give us a summary of things that they could do.
They need to join a union, first and foremost. Better Than Zero has never sought to be a trade union. If I can say something quite controversial, there are some TUC and STUC affiliates who I think thought we were trying to become a trade union. We're absolutely not. No. We're an organisation which seeks to bring workers together who are not in a union and put them in their respective union. They should be joining. That's the first thing they should be doing. But what we hope to do with those members is turn them into activists. We don't want them to just become a paper member of a union and be serviced every couple of years when they need support. What we want is an activist core, and that's what we've built, is an activist core of young, diverse workers who are actually collectivising whatever their particular issues are. So I would say, if you know what that issue is, I would join a union so that you're getting your own individual protection. Encourage others to join a union and to get involved in whatever the collective case is. So, say for example, you're not being paid for your holidays. That's such a legalistic win. That's something that you can put together in a collective grievance with the support of your union. I really doubt that you would have to take it much further than a grievance to win that, because they could be taken to tribunal for breaking the law. But really, the big thing is collectivise, because as an individual, particularly if you're a young woman, if you go to that employer and you say, I'm not being paid my holidays, and you're on a 0 hours contract, they will not give you hours for the following week. If you're not in a union, you've got no legal recourse to actually challenge that. So I would say join a union, collectivise the issue with the people around you, come to as much training as possible. One thing we find is when we bring a worker on board and they get involved in what we're trying to do, there's a total thirst for learning. We do courses on everything from, taking back control of your workplace, sexual harassment in the workplace, incredible course. We do Polish language courses, we do sign language courses, we do all sorts of courses. that teach you what your rights are and how to enforce them. So I would say get on every TUC and STUC course that you can get on, and really bring workers together. That's what we can facilitate, but we cannot do it without the buy-in of the workers themselves.
Yeah, and even if people are hesitant, I suppose, to join a union, because sometimes that can be quite scary for workers, a lot, particularly young workers, don't even know what a trade union is. Get involved in some way. Get active, contact Better Than Zero. There's other ways you can do it, and then you can join the trade union of your sector when you're ready. But don't let that put you off, definitely.
I think it's a confidence thing as well. People don't know a lot about it. People don't know, and I think that's where Better Than Zero comes into it. So I would just advise to do what I do. Contact Better Than Zero and we'll help you out.
Well, that is related to one of the questions that Josh has sent in, where Josh has said, could you explain a bit more about how you convince workers to join the trade union? In my workplace, a lot of workers don't understand what a union is, and they don't necessarily understand the importance of being a member.
Yeah.
So, great timing.
It's about protection. So it's all very good and well getting your confidence and asking the questions, but you need to be protected. And that's where you really have to join the union. So I would just advise that he gets them all on board as much as he can, and then it's tries to explain this after that, because it can be quite overwhelming. Some people only know the union of what their parents know of a union, which might not be what's exactly up to date now. It's maybe a bit of a dated view. So educating them.
They have to want to join it. You're not going to, if you get the people that are anti-union, may not know enough about it. And I suppose we work our way in a different way, where people can come along to other events, they can come along to the training, they can come along to the hubs without being a union member, and they will then, I suppose, have the experience of engaging with other workers from other trade unions and other sectors.
This is a bit simplistic, but I see all workers on a spectrum from, as Claire said, the 5%, hopefully it's no more than 5%, who are ideologically opposed to unions. They see them to be, they might be conservative themselves. They don't agree with the concept of unions, right? I'm not saying they're untouchable, you can't go near them, but, leave them to one side. Remember that 85-90% of the workforce will be just a vacillating middle of people who don't know about unions. It's not that they're opposed to unions. We are on the other end of the spectrum of the 5 or 10%, hopefully it's going to get bigger, who are ideologically, we want unions to change society. The 85-90% might not join the union for that reason, but it's protection in the first instance. And then it's the simple sentence I would say to someone who's really reluctant to join is strength in numbers. You will not get anywhere with a complaint or an anger or frustration that you have with the employer because of that power dynamic. You will not get any further if it's just you. You'll have the protection legally, but you will not have the collective force of numbers. So I would say strength in numbers. Why the hell would you not be in a union? Because that's how you're actually going to affect change.
And the union shouldn't be seen as a separate body. The people in the workplace joining together and make the union. And I think that's quite important to say as well, because we always go, join the union. It's not separate.
Join your
we are the union. The people in the workplace are the union. And that's quite important, that they are valuable and they are important. And without them, there would be no union.
I think we've probably got time for another couple of questions before we wrap up. Is there a limit to how many hours you can work in a week or month as per the Working Time Directive on a 0 hours contract?
Yes, you cannot work more than 48 hours. Sorry, it would be a breach of the Working Time Directive if you were made to work more than 48 hours and you hadn't signed the opt-out. The problem is that there are some contracts that I've seen in the bar industry which have a clause written into the contract, really, really hidden into the contract, that effectively says, clause 7.63, you agree to work more than 48 hours out with the Working Time Directive. So watch out for that in your contract. Yeah. If it says that, you can challenge it. However, I would watch what you're doing there, because what you're effectively saying is, I cannot work more than 48 hours. But I know what that person's saying. They're saying, how unfair is it that you are not guaranteed hours, but yet you might end up working 55? We would always argue that you should be working, you have a right to challenge for the average hours that you work per week. So one of the only good things to come out of the Taylor review was a suggestion that after a year, you should have the right to request your average hours and be taken off 0 hours contract. Obviously, that's a step in the right direction. But why should you need to wait a year?
Yeah.
I mean, Jen was working 11 years doing 30, 40-hour weeks and never had any guarantee of hours.
Yeah.
So that's what's wrong with 0 hours. So we would say challenge that, do it on a collective basis. But the simple answer is no. Unless you've actually opted out. I'm making this more complicated. If you've opted out of that, you can be made to work more than 48 hours, is my point. If you haven't opted out of it, it's unlawful.
Okay. One final question here. If we haven't answered every question that's been sent in, we'll come back later and provide some written answers on the Ask a Question panel. But the final question, do you have any cases where freelance workers, especially younger people keen to make an impression in perhaps the creative industries or others, are taken on by an organisation on a rate dictated by the employer and are then continued to be hired for months on end without being offered staff contracts?
Yeah, gig economy.
The entire gig economy, we've organised workers from Deliveroo to the Fringe. Just to give an example from the Fringe, creative industries particularly, almost like hospitality, people do that job or that work not for the wages, not for the kudos, not for it's because they love it. They're a creative person. They want to be building scenery for sets and stuff. That's what they love to do. What profit-making companies are doing is taking advantage of that creative urge to do that job. They're not paying the minimum wage.
Yep.
They're making them work way more than 50 hours a week. They're not even putting in basic health and safety requirements. So yes, to give one example that I'm willing to name, there is an organisation in Edinburgh called C Venues, which has existed for 20, 25 years on an entirely voluntary basis. So this is a profit-making company that makes tens of millions every single year at the Fringe, employs hundreds of people to do everything from build sets to tear tickets to serving drinks. Every single one of them is unpaid. The managers are unpaid. They are paid a voluntary expenses rate of between £200 and £600 for 5 weeks' work. So what we've been told from our members there is that they're paid as little as £1.38 an hour is what they're actually earning. And my first question is, why the hell would you do that? And it's because they love the creative industries. They want to build sets. They want to do those things.
It's a hope of a job at the end of it as well. There's that sort of they think that they do this, they're going to get the experience, they're going to be noticed, and at the end of it, they're going to get a contract, they're going to get a permanent job. Mm-hmm. But what happens is the next person comes along and exploits that. Yep. The next person comes along and exploits that. Dangling a carrot. Yeah, exactly, dangling a carrot.
So we are taking this organisation to tribunal for breach of the Minimum Wage Act. There's no doubt in my mind that they have broke the Minimum Wage Act. The problem we foresee, and I suppose 0 hours contract comes into this as well, is that you have profit-making companies using complete loopholes and voluntary schemes to not even pay the minimum wage. Equally, employers who are taking people on for 0 hours contracts, knowing that they will not be given them hours. Yeah. It's to keep costs as low as possible.
Yeah. Okay, well, thanks everyone for sending your questions. As I said, we'll get Claire, Jennifer, and Brian to come back afterwards and answer your questions. So we hope you've enjoyed today's webinar. Hopefully you've been inspired to sign the petition to ban 0 hours contracts. There's a little button at the bottom of the screen, green button saying sign a petition. Please click on that and join the fight against 0 hours contracts. Next webinar will be in March. Please check the TC Education website to find out exactly when and what that is. But in the meantime, happy HeartUnions Week, everybody, and we'll see you again.
Bye, guys.
Bye.